B2B Power Hour. Morgan. It's Friday, and you wouldn't believe this. It is the B2B Power Hour. Welcome, everyone.
Happy Friday. Welcome to the B2B Power Hour. I'm always so excited. Seems like we've got some good folks joining us this morning. If you're here, I want to see you drop a hi in chat. We love to use chat, so you got to drop a hi in chat. But we always like to, if you're new around here, if you haven't been here before to one of our Friday live shows, we do these every Friday at this time, and we like to kick it off with a question of the day. So, Nick, what's the question of the day?
I'm actually really excited to hear the answers for this one.
Yeah.
If you could spend the entire day with one person, dead or alive, who would you spend that day with?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer. Hmm. who would I?
And for while Morgan's thinking, everybody, these are always recorded. You can either go to the b2bpowerhour.com to find past shows. If you're registered for the event and you come back to it, the recording will be right here.
Mm-hmm.
But Morgan, back to the question of the day.
There's
Who would you
a
spend your day with?
gosh, and I'm spacing on her name, which is really bad because I actually admire her a lot. She's now since passed. She died in 2016, but she's one of the world famous architects, and she was based out of London. And as a creative and as somebody who enjoys people who challenge the process and challenge people's expectations, I'd love to spend a day with her. And for the life of me, I cannot remember her name, but she has an architecture agency named after her. And she's famous for deconstructive sorts of buildings. So where people think like you shouldn't do shapes and forms, she was all doing shapes and forms. And like, oh, you think you need a hard line here? Yeah, screw that. We're going to have something fun here. And like that's very in line with my personality, and apparently she was great to hang out with. So I would just like to learn from her and her like creative process and the way she thinks through things. I think I would like to spend a day with her.
Originally, I always wanted to hang out with Gary Vee. And he actually offered me at one point to go and if I wanted to come to New York, that he'd have dinner with me. Young and naive me thought it wasn't real, and so I didn't ever do it. But
Oh gosh.
I think it kind of changes depending on where you are. Because like David Denver, hey buddy, had said like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, like that work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a good reminder of all these different names. Is sales is a team sport. Because our birthday boy Saad Khan is here today,
Hey,
and
what's
like
up, Saad?
every time Saad hangs out with us, I'd be happy to go and spend a day with him and sell alongside him. Because not only does he push me to be better, but he gives me great ideas, and his energy is contagious. So I think it really depends.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of the books we've read recently, like Jen Allen and the Challenger Customer, like Brandon Flaherty next week.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Sales. Like there's a lot of people that they'll just make you better by being around them, right?
Her name is Zaha Hadid. I remembered it. She's a British Pakistani architect. Zaha Hadid. Look her up. She's awesome. But truly, like what you're pointing to, we are a product of the people we hang around with.
You know who actually would be really interesting? So I know a lot of people, I'm surprised I haven't seen it, Zig Ziglar.
Oh, Zig, a classic choice.
But the other one is How to Make Friends and Influence People, the one and only
Dale Carnegie.
I wonder what he would think of the world right now that we're selling in, and how he would have changed his approach if he were to rewrite that book now.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of winning over people and influencing them, we got a banger of a topic today. And if this is your first time here, you got to know something. This is your hour as much as ours. Like, if you got questions, throw them in chat. If you have comments, throw them in chat. We want to see people participating in this. It's not just, I mean, yes, we are talking heads in the sense of like, we're here and you can see our heads, but we're not talking heads. Like, we want to interact with y'all. So, Nick, How the hell do you book a meeting with anyone?
So I want to ask you guys a question. You have names on a list. Names on a list that you're calling. Do you have a reason to have them on that list? I think it all comes down to the real reason.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a real reason to reach out, other than our product is amazing, you should want us, this is where sales falls apart because it's all about you.
Mm.
And we see this all the time with sellers that reach out to us. Is they're talking about tactics and they're talking about outreach and they're talking about all these things, and it's like, fantastic. What does your research look like, and what's your strategy for outreach?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you starting so far back? Well, the easiest way to do outreach is to tell them why you're reaching out.
And
And
it's
think about that, like, so simple, right? Like, hey,
so
Morgan,
simple. Yep.
we have this really great social selling program that I think would be great for you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Morgan, I see that you've grown your account like crazy on LinkedIn. And I'm curious, has it been leading to sales as well?
Mm-hmm.
The art of sales is in the conversation. If you guys want to see this done really well, Stu Heineke,
Mm-hmm.
with how he uses memes and like cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
sales is about creativity and conversation. And I feel like it got lost in our automated digital world.
Totally. I see a comment from Michael here. Can this event be reviewed afterwards? Of course. And if you're with us right now and you stick around for a little while, we do have something special, totally free. It's just, a practical way to do some of the stuff that we're talking through today. So stick around for that. One of the things that pops into my mind, Nick, when sellers come to us, they say, how can I get in front of this account? They just raised a Series C. It's like, cool. There's going to be 50 other people who threw them into an
Mo
automation
money,
sequence.
mo problems.
And
Give
they're
me
going to
that
try
money.
and reach out to them because they used a Series C as a trigger. So we're not, I think it's important to clarify, like, a reason to reach out isn't the fact that they raised money, right? There's going to be a deeper business case, a deeper
Yeah.
reason that you're actually reaching out to them in the first place from a very strategic level. Like, I was talking with an SDR who is transitioning into an account executive role, and that he is going to be given a list of 1,500 accounts to work. And so if you think it, we all have this, even if our managers don't give us, we ourselves could create a list of 1,500 people, right? Can you have a good reason to prioritize that list? Who's first and why?
Hmm.
And why them,
Hmm.
right? And as you always say, Nick, why now?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't answer why them, why now, why us, three fundamental design thinking questions, your outreach is going to sound a lot like everybody else's outreach because they're doing it on their terms, right?
What do we call that, Morgan?
On my time outreach. It's on my time, right?
Versus.
Just in time outreach.
So, Courtney, your question couldn't come at a better time. It was just in the nick of time.
Hey, just
Maybe
in
we'll see. We'll see if I can
the
answer it.
nick.
So,
In the
how do
nick.
you scale the why are they on your list? So, Morgan, where do most sellers stop when they're doing their research? Where do they stop? And why is it a problem?
It's a good question. I imagine that they stop at, like, name, title, position, company. Like, oh, you're the VP of sales. I should talk to you. And that's
Yeah,
it.
they do firmographics.
Mhm.
Where's your headquarters location? How much revenue? What size of business? What's your head count? That's kind of it.
Honestly.
And so, what does that tell you? So, this puts you in the world of assumptions. There's the assumption that they need you, there's the assumption that they want you, and that's what most people sell on. But what if, what if, what if we were a detective? What if we were the doctor that was providing a diagnosis. And we're looking at the real reasons of why change, why now. And so, Courtney, to your question is there's triggering events like somebody gets a promotion, somebody just raised a Series C, and now the nature of their business has changed forever. But they don't know that. They just know they got money. But because you're unique, have your own point of view from the work you have done and the experience you have gained, you know something they don't. And so what we have to do is we actually have to we actually have to take a step back, and we have to run all of our triggers like campaigns. And so we have to really figure out where's our time best spent. And so if you've heard us talk, there's two different ways to go and prospect. There's your strategic and there's your triggered. Strategic are those top tier accounts, those like, if I land one of these, I am going to hit President's Club in basically one deal.
Yeah.
And I'm going to set the record, and it's going to be like the best strategic deal ever. We're not talking about that one today. We will a little bit later, though. We're talking about triggered. So there's a few things that I look at. Hopefully I didn't erase it because I primed myself so that I... So guys, you're going to want to write this down and think about how this applies to your business. And so ratios. Relative to the market, what do the ratios tell you? So one of the ones that we look at all the time is, what is the ratio of sales to marketing? When you see a company that has a ratio of 5-to-1, 5 sellers to 1 marketer, it tells me that they're a sales-driven organization and they don't really value marketing. So what could that do to the business? How could I start a conversation based on my unique point of view? Hey, I noticed that you have a 20-to-1 seller to manager ratio. What does that tell me? And what might happen if you're not careful in the next couple months? When they find that the golden ratio of managers to sellers is 8-to-1, anything over, and you might have retention issues or people feel like they're not getting the support they need. But this is your unique point of view of working with customers, talking to them on a regular basis, and then setting up these triggers. And these triggers are really easy to be set up in Sales Nav. And so all you do is you do a save search. You take those very basic things that we talked about, your industry, geography, headcount, funding, technologies. What are those basic minimum requirements that they need to be? That is your list. That's the bare minimum. Now, over top of that, this is the triggers. This is those events. These are those moments, those mental shortcuts that people realize that, oh crap, like good enough is no longer good enough. They're looking to make a change. They realize there's a problem. Another one is rates. Hey, Morgan, I saw that you guys haven't hired over the past year, but you just suddenly hired 15 people. You got to think about, like, what is that telling you? Or
and
hey,
and especially if like they're hiring, I mean, think about this. They didn't hire anybody, and they just hired 15 new people, and 10 of them are product engineers. And the company you work at sells a product that helps product engineers. That's interesting, right? You're like, oh, they're investing in their product engineers. And also, we know from other companies or from talking with other customers that product engineers often encounter X problem, and we solve that problem. So now the outreach isn't just, you have money, buy my stuff. It's, you just hired 10 new product engineers. That's super interesting. Also, we just worked with 13 other companies that went through the same thing, and their product engineers encountered problem X. We help you solve that. Worth a call?
hey, I saw you just hired 14 engineers. Normally this happens when you're launching a brand new product, but I saw that you haven't hired sales yet, and I'm curious. How are you going to launch this new product? But this is diving deep into the trigger, the reason, the root cause. Businesses make investments. There's a root cause. Nobody buys a hammer. Nobody buys a software. People buy things to be put into their process. Hopefully not to go and just, change the fact they don't have one, but you have to go into this. And then, so like another one is rank. Hey, Morgan, I went and looked at your company and You out of the 100 people that work for you, 55 are using LinkedIn actively in the last 30 days. I got to ask, how are you doing that? You're in the top 10% of companies I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Or you could use G2. Look, when I take a look at your competitors, they're outranking you in their reviews. You just got hit with, 3 1-star, 2-star reviews. And it seems like you're selling a customer service suite. It seems like one of the problems is getting a hold of your reps. Are you seeing that problem? Is that something that you've noticed? Right? Because you're trying to clarify more than just, you have money, buy from me.
This is where you go from static lists.
Mm-hmm.
The static list is that bare minimum. But what we do is we layer on campaigns to make it dynamic, to give you a reason to reach out. And when you automate this with Google Alerts, with Sales Nav and saved searches, then when you go and do your time block every day, they're automatically populating and you have accounts to go and run with that week. The other ones that I look at all the time is raises. So they raised a Series B. What would they not be expecting, or what changes in their company at that level? It's not about the money.
Mm-mm.
If you make it about the money, you will lose every single time. Another really common one that I see a lot of people just totally miss the mark on is recruiting. Hey, I saw that you just hired a sales enablement person. Buy my stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Morgan, I saw you just hired sales enablement. Normally, when the leaders tell me when they hire this role, content is playing a bigger role in the company. And I'm curious, is it content on the top of funnel or the bottom of funnel?
Mm-hmm. Trying to identify, you're basically doing discovery, pre-discovery. You're like, hey, how does this sit for you? What's going on here when you're doing your outreach?
It's the why change.
Mm-hmm.
What changed? We've identified the why now, but it's the why change. And all you're doing, and Will Allred talks about this all the time,
Mm-hmm.
it's what is the observation and what is your unique point of view of why that's a thing,
Mm-hmm.
why that's a problem, why that matters. And
Mm-hmm.
then all you're doing is judging on curiosity. Now, somebody had asked a really good question, and I want to go and answer it. Found it.
Benny asks, what do you do if the level you're reaching doesn't have details or they're not active on LinkedIn?
You don't start with them.
Yeah, simple as that.
And so under spotlights in Sales Nav, if you're
Mm-hmm.
using Sales Nav, spotlights will go and show you who's posted in the last 30 days. People that comment and post will show that they're active. Lean into the people that are more active. Sometimes certain companies and certain industries, it's better to go bottom up. And it also depends on how easy it is to find information. When you have a public company, you can go and look at their investment reports, figure out where they're trying to improve, where they see an opportunity, and you can go bottom down
Mm-hmm.
because you understand the business case at a very deep level. You can be really strategic. But with private companies, it's not an option. You have to fact gather.
Mm-hmm.
A great way to do this, a really great way to do this, is job descriptions.
Who are they hiring for? What are
Oh,
they measuring that person's success on?
and why does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
So think of it like you don't go to a restaurant because you're not hungry. You don't
No.
go to the doctor because you feel good. So when people hire for someone, there's a pain or gain that's felt, that's realized. They're realizing there's a reason to change something. But they've told you in the job description,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we want somebody that can give us repeatable and scalable results because we're not doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we really want to update our prospecting program because people are doing this static plain outreach and it's not receptive to customers. Hey, we really want to go find somebody that can find those top sales talent so that we can retain them because they keep running away.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to read between the lines and find the verbs, find those key things in the job descriptions. So now you got a trigger. The trigger is tied to the ICP. Now you're finding the personas. The reason why these job descriptions are so freaking important is do your research before you talk to them. And then when
Mhm.
you talk to them, you're validating your hypothesis, your value hypothesis. What is important to them? What are they being judged on? Why do they have a job at that company using those job descriptions? And a lot of the time, they'll even tell you their tech stack and all the other goodies as well. And
Mhm.
so when you do your outreach and you have that trigger, you can tie it to them and what they're being judged on. That's a beautiful thing.
I think it's interesting because like this week we've got connect and pitched so many times, and one of the interesting things that I see happen. Let's talk about what it sounds like when you don't do this work. What it sounds like is I'm a vendor.
I thought you were
I'm
going to pull up
reach.
your DMs.
I know, right? I could. It is a minefield this week. Um, I I'm a vendor. I have something to offer to you. Can I book some time on your calendar to show you what I can offer to you? It's all about them. It's all about the vendor, right?
I'm
Because
amazing. I'm
I'm
amazing.
amazing. You
Book
should,
time so I can show you
you
just
know,
how amazing I am.
right. So here's the thing that can be accomplished by the base level targeting Nick has outlined. If you're only using firmographic information and you're filtering through all of the different accounts about who you're going to outreach to, you will still sound like that. But this layer above, this fundamental strategic layer of triggers, is about articulating a business case, articulating assumptions, and interest that shifts the focus from you, the seller, to them, the buyer. So here's the thing. If you want, I'll just say this clearly. If you think you have something to sell to me, the best DM I can ever get is tell me about your problems. Basically, that's the concept. Okay. You're not going to send somebody a DM that says, tell me about your problems. But if I get connected from somebody who might be the right fit for me and they say, man, I love your recent stuff, personalization. Uh, I've loved your content. One thing I've noticed is that your podcast does XYZ thing and you're hosted on this service. Are you enjoying that service? And immediately I'm like, should
Oh shit.
should I not enjoy that service? And also like great research and okay, obviously there's a conversation here. Oh, sure, let me entertain this. Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying it. Like, why is that? He goes, well, we offer. Well, one thing we see when we work with podcast, this is the trigger language. One thing we see when we work with podcast hosts like yourself is that they struggle to do why. Are you seeing that? So even if you have built up your assumptions case, and we'll get to this in more detail, your outreach is basically just validating that assumption case, which starts with you understanding what triggers you're relying on to do outreach.
Okay, so we got some great comments in here. I want to pull a couple up.
Yes.
Please, you have questions, throw them in the comments. I will get to them.
Hmm.
Even if I'm on a Shakespearean monologue, I will come back. Okay, how do you know their hiring numbers? There's a lot of different ways to do this.
Hmm.
One of the easiest ways is if you have Sales Nav and you have them in an account list, they will tell you when they're growing or when they're shrinking.
Yep.
If you scroll down on a company's profile, when you clicked on the company, you're scrolling down the profile, it'll tell you their growth rate. And I believe if you have premium, it might even show you on their company page just in LinkedIn.
I believe that's true.
I think.
But if you're inside Sales Nav anyways, it's the easier way to do it.
Because I normally just stay in Sales Nav when I'm working so that I don't get,
Hmm.
have a squirrely moment of like, ooh,
Yeah.
that's interesting, and then waste time.
Yep.
So I go and use Sales Nav and it tells me. It'll
Hmm.
also tell you by what division. If you scroll down, they'll even break it down as it sales, engineering, marketing, business
Hmm.
development, and how much, and
Hmm.
trends over 6 months, a year, and more.
Hmm.
Okay. There was another good one. Oh,
Brian asks, so even if you've got the perfect why them, why now, and why us, why would the prospect want to talk about what's going on in their business to some stranger on LinkedIn?
so
It's great.
there's two kind of mindsets when it comes to life. There's growth where you think that you can learn things like brand like new, or you're always growing and there's always more to be found or discovered, or like you're not stuck. And then there's the people that have this scarcity mindset where they believe that people are born a certain way and that's all there is to it.
Hmm.
This shows up in prospecting when people, if you've hit a really, really good why them, why now,
Hmm.
and why us isn't even relevant yet.
Yeah.
Don't put that in any of your initial outreach. Yeah, you haven't earned the right to pitch yet because they haven't asked, they haven't shown that they're curious.
Good.
You haven't gauged their interest.
Yep.
But if they're not interested in having a conversation, move on. That's okay.
Yep.
That's why the most dangerous thing in sales is to put all your eggs in one basket. If you have an account and you're only ever reaching out to one person, why?
Yeah.
Why just that one person? You'll notice that certain departments are more active on LinkedIn. Certain departments are more active in other social media or digital communities.
Hmm.
Some people are better at email. Some people are better on the phone. But if you don't track it, you'll never know. If people are just not receptive, move on.
So I have a flavor to add to this question, and then we'll come back to other things because I think we've reached this point, Nick, where I want to talk about the triangle. So in traditional sales, if you think about your time and energy, and you think of it like a triangle, the bottom of the triangle is going to be all your outreach, right? It's all of your emails and calls that you're doing to prospects. And then the chunk above it, which is a little bit smaller, is your follow up sequences. Okay. So even though you have a big chunk of outreach, then you're doing follow up, particularly with people who reply or who you're trying to get a reply from. And sometimes it's automated more often than not. And then the sort of crown on that pyramid is qualification. Okay. So this is traditional sales. So you qualify after you do all of your outreach, right? Even though you have some base level targeting, you're basically trying to validate some of the triggers and some of the timing based on excellent, what the uh, purchaser or the buyer wants. What we are beginning to articulate for you and where I want us to move to is what this second triangle looks like inside social selling. And this is important because on LinkedIn, you do not have to be an anonymous seller. You do not have to be a stranger, right? So the top of social selling is warming up accounts. And intentionally, we actually skipped over this at the beginning of our session today because we wanted to talk about the triggered accounts, the center of the triangle, because this is where the magic happens when you actually do the bottom, which I think I'm partially blocking, Nick, which says direct outreach, the blue little triangle. So your direct outreach is actually the smallest amount of time and energy you're spending on LinkedIn on a day-to-day basis. You're actually spending most of your time warming up accounts and the second most amount of your time looking for and working with triggered accounts. That's a
Ooh,
okay. We're
trying.
experimenting with our visuals here. I saw a question. I think this is fine, Nick. We can go back to just ourselves.
That's all right.
No, it's fine. Somebody had asked, like, is this recorded? Can I listen to it later? Yes, of course. We also have something fun to offer if you stick around till the end. And you can always find this on YouTube or on our podcast. So the reality is, Brian, and to anybody else listening, you do not have to be a stranger, right? When you're calling and emailing, you're technically not a stranger anymore anyways. People are going to look up your LinkedIn profile, but you're a name that they don't know. And so the goal of using LinkedIn properly, sort of the title of today's session, is that they know you before you do outreach. They know
The
you
warm
before they
up.
do outreach. You do a warm up. So, Nick, what does the warm up look like? What are the principles of the warm up?
So the warm up is usually like a 2-week buffer. I
Mm-hmm.
find is kind of that best time frame. And it's how are you going to show up on their radar? It was kind of like the old school way where we'd send a couple emails before we'd call,
Mm-hmm.
or we do a couple calls before we go and throw like an email and then a voicemail to email. Is you're showing up in a way that they notice. So one of the easiest ways, if they're active on LinkedIn, especially, or other platforms, doesn't matter if this is Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, go in their comments. And so show up consistently so that they keep seeing you in their comments. So when you call them, you've already earned the right, or they know who you are. So they're actually ready to talk to you. So Morgan,
Hmm.
but what do you write in comments? It's sometimes people write really silly posts and reshares that are really hard to go and say anything about. So what do you comment back?
It's a challenge. It can be a challenge. So it does depend upon how you're targeting, right? Who you're commenting on. So there's going to be a fairly large bucket in our experience of people who exclusively reshare posts and they don't add anything unique. Okay. The only comment I found that works super well is a question on the reshare. So if you have a bunch of target accounts or a bunch of target personas in one account that you are working on warming up, and most of them are just resharing content every once in a while, I would take the opportunity to ask an insightful or meaningful or curious question in the comments and maybe tie it back to the specific thing in the event or the specific post that they're resharing. But try and kickstart that conversation basically. So that's sort of bucket one. Bucket two is accounts that are sharing their own content. Either they're resharing something and they're adding their point of view, or they're posting themselves. And on those posts, you have a few options actually. So the first one, Nick likes to call key to insight or first to insight. And basically that comment sounds like yes and. And that yes and can be an agreement. You can agree with the post and share something meaningful or insightful from your perspective, or it's a yes and that disagrees with the post and you are sharing your own perspective or insight. Okay. Second option, of course, is the question again. Ask something about the post. Third option can be tricky, but it's called the joke comment. So you make a joke. If you're not great at communicating humor through text, this is going to be a harder one to nail. I found emojis help a lot in communicating intent, especially if you have a sarcastic sense of humor like I do. I do, Nick, right?
Same
Yeah, emojis help a lot. And then lastly, there can be a comment where you tag
gifts.
in a peer or a trusted friend, and preferably not somebody at your own company. Like the goal, some of the stuff that we don't have time to cover today is like building your network out here, and hopefully you should be finding other people while you're using LinkedIn like this that become friends and peers, and that you could tag into conversations and add their own perspective, right? So you'll see if you follow either of us. Sometimes, Nick commented on this or like Morgan was tagged in this. A lot of the time, it's Nick or I tag teaming either of us into a conversation. And then, so that's bucket two. So bucket one was just blank reshare, ask a question. Bucket two is organic content. And bucket three is the little secret hack. That's called leverage. Okay, so leverage is when you put in a little bit of effort and you get a lot of results for that. It's like the little fulcrum or like a seesaw. This is when you go after influencers that your ICP accounts follow. Now, this takes a little bit of time to like nail. You
I love
have to
this one.
look you have to look at your ICP accounts. And my recommendation starts at 10 up to 20 for your first pass. And the goal is, and so you can do this over a week. You don't have to do this all at once. But the goal is to check out some profiles, active profiles of your ICPs, okay? The people who are commenting and liking. And that's not going to be everybody, but it's going to be some subset. And what you want to find are accounts that they follow that have a following. And like the benchmark there is 5,000 ish followers plus. Okay. We're not talking Gary Vee here. We're not talking
No
massive followers.
celebrities.
Okay. No celebrity influencers. We're talking sort of niche followers or niche influencers. And of course, it can be up to like 100,000, but beyond that, it's going to be hard to make this work. Um, you find those followers and then you validate, do they have enough followers, do they post content that's relative to the industry, that also, and then you check out their posts, and are more of your ICPs hanging out in the influencers comments? So it's not just this one profile you checked, but are your ICPs hanging out in the influencers comments? Because now guess what you can do? So first thing, of course, is you can comment on the influencer's post with all the options we talked about. That's great. That's leverage. That shows up in the algorithm and people see it. But you can also reply to other people's comments that are your ICP with
And
the
this
same
is the
options.
magic. This
And
is
I
where it
will say,
happens.
I'm okay at this. Nick is a master at this. Like I can kickstart conversations plenty well, but Nick has this nailed to a science. So if you see him ever on on Florin Tatulia's content or anybody else's, you'll see Nick isn't commenting on Florin's post. Nick is jumping into the comments and finding somebody in our ICP who has commented and striking up a conversation with them
Not pitching.
and not pitching. So, should we talk about vampire sales right now?
No, or just
Oh,
before we go into it, I
okay.
figured out 2 other hacks to go and do
Okay.
this because
Yes.
certain industries are really hard to find influencers,
Hmm.
and sometimes it just takes a really long time. So
Hmm.
2 of my cheats to go and figure this out is what trade shows or conferences are really popular
Ooh.
and who's speaking at them.
Hmm.
And not necessarily the keynote, but like who are the other smaller, and filler isn't fair, but they're the more niche speakers.
Yes.
Those are your gold. The other one is what are the top podcasts in your space? Who are the hosts and who is speaking at them? Now, this is a like even bigger hack because what I do a lot of the time, and Jen Allen kind of spilled the beans on this yesterday, but what I love to do is I actually go on to Spotify or go on whatever one, and I just go and type in their name
Mm.
and I look for the most interesting podcast that's outside of their normal content, and I find something interesting that was like that aha moment for me, or that like, wow, I never thought about it that way, and then I go and turn it into a question in a DM or in a personalized invitation, and I am like 100 for 100 on that.
And the important thing to remember about all of this doesn't sit in your direct outreach container. And this doesn't even sit in your triggered account container. This sits in your warm up container. The
Mm-hmm.
purpose of warming up accounts is so that you're not a stranger, right?
No stranger danger.
No stranger danger. You're not an anonymous.
what
Oh my
what did
gosh.
the Brooklyn say the other day? Like, can you get out of my dock?
Yeah.
The anonymous badger.
Anonymous badger. Yeah.
You're giving me anxiety. Think about that. Like, if you just randomly show up at these random acts of social and randomly comment and you're not consistent, people are like, who is this random person that keeps keeps like just jumping in so like haphazardly or asking like strange questions or like derailing the
Yes.
whole point of the post? That's another thing you don't want to do. But
So this is where I think a lot of sellers actually screw up. And so I want to say something really quick, which is that the goal of warming up accounts is to have a meaningful conversation.
it's not to
That's it.
belittle them in the comments. What?
Yeah.
Or
I
pitch
know.
them?
It's crazy. I know it's crazy, Nick, but it's genuinely to just connect with somebody. Like if you we make this too complicated, I think. If you are at an in-person networking event that like one of your local entrepreneurship groups or one of your local networking groups put together and you went around to your target ICP at that networking event and you said, "Hey, I'm Morgan. I sell this. Do you want to buy from me?" Like that's ridiculous. We know that's ridiculous. So
The
why are we
drive-by
doing
business cardings?
yeah. Just
But
taking sticky notes and slapping them on people's foreheads. Like, you should buy from me. Like, that's what most of our outreach is when we don't warm them up and we don't have triggers
Mm.
because we're just saying, you have money, you should buy from us. Like, that's right. That's it. So, the goal of warming them up is not to close them, it's not to book a meeting, it's not anything except having a meaningful conversation.
And to think about it this way. A lot of outreach, a lot of outreach is you opening up somebody's front door uninvited, sitting at their table and asking them about either pitching them or
Hmm.
asking about their fears or like where do you want to be in 2 to 3 years? What are your greatest fears? What keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
The whole warm-up procedure is getting invited into their home, invited in because you're trusted to have those bigger, deeper conversations that move the dial for them in their career or for the business.
Hmm.
And I think this is something that got lost in digital and with automation is we forgot it's about building it's having conversations and earning trust at scale so that people are willing and want to have those deeper conversations. And this is where we call it the rule of three comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you move to a DM? When the hell do I go and
Have a
send them a
conversation.
connection? Yeah, a connection request.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Well, think about it like a round trip. If you go to a coffee shop, you see somebody once, are you going to ask for their number? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how long you talked. Maybe you did. But if you see them a few times and you keep seeing them, and every time you see them, you keep having good conversations, it's probably going to be a pretty low ask to go and get their number or connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it like round trips. If I comment on Morgan's post, he comes back with a question, and we go back and forth 3 times, 3 round trips. The door is open. You're open to go and move it to a connect. The connection request, you can either keep that conversation going,
Mm-hmm.
thank them for have the conversation in the comments. It's not your invitation to pitch.
No.
And then move it to the DMs. The DMs is when it's private conversation. And this is where you can start asking bigger, harder questions that are private. So think of your discovery questions. Which are those lighter discovery questions that you want to know to determine if this is a good deal to prioritize right now, or if this is even the right person to be talking to? Because this is where you can then ask, doesn't sound like this is on your plate. Who do you think would feel left out if I didn't go talk to them about it? Like, just ask a question, make it fun. Don't ask the same shit over and over.
Well,
Like,
I was just
who's
about
the
to say,
decision maker?
I was going to say, are you the decision
Bant.
maker? Like, let's not do bant in the DMs. Think of the DMs as if you're texting somebody, okay?
Mm.
Right? You're actually literally texting them. And maybe to help enforce that, you should go onto your phone and you should use LinkedIn's app to text them. Okay? Like that's all you're doing. So if you have super formalized, blocky, chunky paragraphs worth of text in the DMs, it is not going to work to your advantage because this is social, right? People are here to have conversations. They're not here to come to be sold. So what you are trying to do, what we're doing is we're transitioning from warmed up into triggers, right? We are trying to validate that that the trigger is real. We're trying to ask lightweight, casual questions that it's real, right? So, um, this is hard, I've noticed, for sellers because we are so used to moving immediately to the pitch. We're so used to getting that inch of permission with somebody and then saying, pitch slap, hey, you want my stuff? And you shouldn't do that. And here's the reason. You can scale that. You can do 1,000 of those. And we don't recommend them because you'll get put in LinkedIn jail or permanently banned. And you'll use automation sequences to do that. So you can scale this. And here's the sad thing. You'll see a little ounce of success. You'll see a few percentage points. But what you won't see are the results that we're seeing and the results the sellers we work with are seeing, which is that 80, 90, 100% of their connection requests are accepted, that they're having meaningful conversations every day, warming up their accounts, that when they ask the right questions in a casual way and they do lightweight discovery in the DMs, they are validated that this is the right person to talk to and that this is the right time. So when they say, hey, you want a meeting? They say yes. And we see pretty high acceptance rates for meetings when people accept this, right? It varies a little bit by
And
industry
it
and by
doesn't
role,
take long
but
either.
it does not take long. That's
I
the
want to
thing.
pull up a question because it's relevant to this part of the conversation, Morgan.
Oh, perfect. So Shazabe, I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name today, asks, how do you get to the right contact or ask to be referred to the correct person? There are so many overlapping roles in startups these days. Ain't that the truth? VP or sales may be taking care of growth, partnerships, and sales. Mm-hmm.
So the easiest answer for this is manually prospect before you automate. Go research 5, 10, 20 accounts until you see enough trends over that you have this gut feeling that they're good. So as soon as you get that gut feeling, then you know when your Boolean search, when you got your trigger, then you got that persona. So what you want to do, this is where the magic, the fun comes in, is you've done these manual searches, find 3 to 5 people that you could potentially talk to. Triggers scale really well because as long as it's the same ICP, the trigger should mean the same thing for that company, and it should have the same roles and responsibilities
Ish.
ish. But you'll see when you go and look at job descriptions, when you go and do these things, that you'll find these roles kind of like trickle out. You'll see the trends. And so when you do your outreach to them, the outreach is by that persona.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between, and that's why it scales really well, because you can keep having those same conversations because the observation doesn't change.
Because your observation about VP of sales is going to be 90% on if you've nailed your targeting and your triggers. If every VP of sales you talk to is at a company that just raised their Series B and they're all going to 90% of the time experience the same challenge, there's a 90% chance that this VP of sales that you're basing your outreach on is going to be experiencing the pain that you're observing.
And then the thing to remember is that it's timely.
Mm-hmm.
If I broke my arm and you came to try and sell me insurance, like after I was healed within a certain time frame, I'd probably be more open to it because the pain is fresh.
Yeah.
So you kind of got about 60 to 90 days on most triggers. Because quite frankly, if it's big enough and there's enough there, they're probably already trying to solve it. Now you're going to be playing a price game, or you're going to be dealing with RFPs, or you're going to be competing for business.
Mm.
But I know there's probably somebody going to be asking in here. So what's the difference between triggers and strategic accounts? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's a different approach. Morgan, do you think we should go and dive into that, or should we go look at the questions quick before?
Let's take Paul's question really quick. What if they bring up your products on the first date? What's the best approach? So basically, probably you connect with somebody, and if you follow some of the stuff we're saying, we're not doing an immediate DM, but eventually somebody really quickly asks, "So what do you do?" Or like, "What do you sell?" What should you do, Nick?
Oh, that's interesting. What caught your eye about that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you would use that in your business?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. When somebody brings up their product, they're usually thinking about this. Did I get it, or was I way off the mark?
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is the cause and effect. What caused them to focus on that? Take a stab at it, be humble, and people love to correct you when you're wrong.
And do not take it personally, but it's so true. People love to say, "No, you're dead wrong. No, that's not that's not at all what was going on." Ekta asks, this is actually an interesting one, which we can tie together with Isabella's question. So Ekta asks, do you think sales stills works when we are just trying to make friends and people are not immune, feared, offended by someone getting inside their mind, asking questions almost like a stalker? So the thing is, if you're asking questions that you think are stalkerish, chances are the buyer is also going to think you're asking questions that are kind of stalkerish.
So I have a question for your
Mm-hmm.
question. Why did you start with the person and not the company?
Mm-hmm.
Business is about business. Friends are about friends. Friends are people. Businesses are made of people, but businesses have business cases to make investments to avoid loss or to go and realize a gain. If your outreach isn't based on the account first, you are playing a dangerous game. It is completely fine to build your network with peers,
Mm-hmm.
people that are interesting, and build your audience. If you're leading with friendship, make it a friendship. It is dishonest. And probably I personally think it's unethical to start a friendship to sell something.
Agreed.
So if you're doing it for business, do it for business. If you're doing it for your personal gain or like just to go and build friendships, do it. There's nothing wrong with that.
And maybe it would help to articulate the point of warming up accounts is not to gain attention. That's what content creators do. Okay. We're talking about social selling. So you're a seller out here on social, and you're trying to figure out how to prospect effectively and how to book a meeting with somebody. You're not just creating content so you can get attention. You're not just creating comments so you can get attention. The point of all of that is you're trying to build credibility. So if you're
Mm.
building credibility through your warm-up exercises, you're basing it on what Nick said, which is about the account, the business case, the connection. You're not trying to get their attention. You are trying to build rapport and trust and credibility and all the rest of that. But it is very important not to confuse those things with let's be friends, right? Because
Yeah.
if it's let's be friends first and then it's a bait and switch, people will shut off. They'll be like, nah, I'm not interested in talking to you anymore. And we've had
So
that happen. I'll be honest with you. Like we have been subject to that before, and it doesn't feel great from the buyer's perspective.
I've been thinking about switching niches
Oh,
since my
yes.
current ICP isn't active on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts about this? What the first step be to network with new ICPs before doing a profile overhaul? I love this question because there's a real easy way to know if you're off base. People don't all use LinkedIn, and not everybody is as active on LinkedIn. Some people are more active on other platforms. It's our job to figure out where people want to have those conversations. That's all sales is, the right conversation with the right person at the right time and the right message, right?
Yeah.
It's conversations. It's all built on conversations. So if you're finding when you're doing your outreach and you're getting below a 30% accept rate, what that's telling you a lot of the time is you're not credible. They look at your profile and they're going, they're just going to try and sell me crap.
Yeah.
It's usually your messaging, yes, can have a big part of it too, but a lot of time they're looking at your profile. So, who are big influencers? Who are the best salespeople? Who are those people that are showing up in those digital communities that are trusted, that are followed by the influencers, that are easily having these conversations where you want to be? What's the same about them? What are the core topics that they're always talking about? Who are they talking to? And do this reverse engineering and start building your profile based on that. Make yourself approachable, make yourself credible. You don't need to recreate the wheel.
Mm-mm.
And then what's your first step to network? Influencers.
Always.
Get in their comments. Start with just a comment on the post and then go through the comments. Don't look at what people are engaging with. What questions do they have? What do they find interesting? What posts are getting the most engagement? I wonder why this role finds that engaging. What could be going on in their business that makes this interesting? I wonder if it's because of uniquely their business, or is it their role, or is it them? And so what you're doing is you're distilling this down into the root cause. Why change? Why now? When we're learning, we're unlearning something. We want to make a change. That's hard. That takes effort. So if we're wanting to change, something kicked us in the ass to go and make that change. So what was it? And a lot of the time we don't do this level of depth because we think that an account's too small. But if you do it once, if you spend a week doing all this research and then start your outreach, think of how much better armed you are with just your knowledge to have good conversations. Because it's like, who hates small talk? Well, they hate small talk because they don't know what to say. But if you
Yeah.
know what to say that people are going to engage with, it's not really that intimidating, or at
Mm-mm.
least it's not as bad.
It's not as bad. And even Kate asks this: what approaches do you take to make sure that your messaging stands out to the potential prospect?
Ooh, good
So
one.
I just want to revisit some of the fundamentals we laid out here and the common mistake, because we attended an event earlier this week that we were at, and I got plenty of automated pitches off of it into my DMs, right? So the classic mistake I see, and we all make this. I make this. Nick has made this. We are as much like experimenters in the trenches as the rest of y'all. So by no means are we like some exemplar, sellers here. Is we forget to tie it back to the problem that they're experiencing. You are reaching out for a reason. So Jordan Crawford, friend of the show, always calls it avoiding the ditch. Okay. You could also talk about a doctor's office. It's sort of the same scenario. As the seller, that there is a problem they're experiencing or that they will experience a problem. That's your trigger. right? That's something's going to happen here that I need to reach out about. Somebody comes into my office, I'm the doctor, and they're experiencing pain, but they don't know what to do about it. Okay. The third analogy, because I'm just grasping for analogies here, is Princess Leia. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Okay. That's going to be a very small percentage of your prospects. But like, again, that could be somebody out there being like, what do I do about this? If we're just reaching out saying, you want to buy my stuff? And we got a little trench coat and we like open up our little software packages here for people to buy. That's not being the doctor. That's not being Obi-Wan. That's not being helping somebody avoid the ditch that's coming up while they're driving. So,
Mm-hmm.
from a fundamental level, we have to make sure that that's nailed and that we can experiment with that and that we can make sure we have the problem nailed. And all we can do, and we don't have a ton, we've talked about this previously in other live shows before, but like, you can use social listening. You can leverage your comments. You can leverage your content. You can do conversations. You're building a case. You're building I don't know, like a business case or a mental model about what they're experiencing through all of your social listening, through all of your engagement strategy. So I don't know, Nick, if you have other things to help
Somebody
refine.
calls you. So everybody keeps telling me prospecting has changed. It has not changed. What has changed is the amount of research people are doing because they have access to phone numbers and emails, and they just do lazy approaches because they have access.
Hmm.
But what has not changed is, why are you calling me? Who are you? And why should I care? Most sellers miss the why should I care? Why should I care?
Yeah.
What's in it for me? Because really, if you're saying, hey Morgan, I offer the I'm an expert in digital LinkedIn marketing lead services, and you should
Oh
go and
God.
buy my services, and let's book a meeting to go and set up how you can buy my services.
It's
There was no trigger.
no,
There
there's no
was
reason.
no there was no why change. There wasn't a reason of why now other than it was on my time prospecting. Hey, I pulled a list and it said that you have a business in a heartbeat, and because you have a heartbeat, I thought I would call you to see if you wanted to buy my crap. I think it's amazing. I called myself an expert, so you should want to buy it because of my self-proclaimed expert status.
Yeah.
This is what's going on in prospecting, is there's no legitimate reason to reach out.
Hmm.
When you add these layers in, you create good conversation because the fact there's a reason to call in the first place.
Yes.
I will say, when you get good at this, like Florin is amazing at this,
Hmm.
is when you've done this with enough repetition, you can make assumptions without having to have a trigger.
Yes.
But this is something that the best salespeople do, and it takes time to develop. You know, once you've talked to a couple hundred VPs of sales or managers or whatever, you can make the assumption, hey, when I talk to leaders like yourself, one of the biggest things on their mind is retention and how the heck they're going to keep those key people so that they can maintain their growth.
Hmm.
Is that something that's top of mind for you right now?
Hmm.
But once again, it's an assumption based on a unique perspective with a are you curious? Gauge interest.
So I want to answer Jacob's question before we conclude our time today. If you're with us, we put together a fun little free guide about how to do all the stuff that we talked about today, plus some extras. And you can find that on our homepage at b2bpowerhour.com. It's just like, it's the title of this, just like how to book meetings without pitching. And it's got all of like the how to's, like the sales nav thing and the social listening thing and the comment types and all sorts of examples. So if you want that, you should just go to b2bpowerhour.com. It's on our homepage under our header, and you can find it there. We'd love to, if you want a copy, if you want some additional help, please, go there and grab a copy. Jacob's question: how direct should you be if you're pitching a lead that has a trigger? Great question.
If I saw you came out of the superstore and I said, hey, it seems like you like to go and buy groceries. I sell groceries too. Would you like to buy?
What?
You have to earn the right to pitch. I'm going to bring it up once more, is vampire sales. Vampire sales, in folklore, vampires weren't allowed into your home unless they were invited. Don't be the blood-sucking vampire trying to go and bite everything that's running by you and drain them of their life and their being with your pitch. Get invited before you pitch. The way to get invited is to ask insightful questions and show them that you know them, or at least know what they're going through, so that you are a value to them. If you see a trigger and you insert your pitch, you will fail every time unless that pitch is gauging curiosity first as part of your going through that process. So,
Mhm.
hey, I saw that you went to the grocery store. I know a lot of people right now with the raising prices of groceries are looking for options, maybe even delivered to their door. Have you ever thought about that? Does that sound a little different than the first pitch that we heard?
Very different. Very, very different.
It's not a one and done.
Mm-mm.
It's not a two and done. A lot of times it's 3+. It can work fast if you ask insightful questions that show them that you know what they're going through. If you don't follow why change, why you, why, or why
Why
change,
change?
why
Why now?
now,
Uh-huh.
why you, and you default to why you, nobody cares
Mm-mm.
yet, because they feel like you're forcing them into something they never asked for. Start with the why change, why now, your observation. Let them naturally work into why you, and you will get it every time. Morgan?
So we're at time. This is we respect people's time. So we're at the end of our power hour today. If you have more questions, and we're seeing a couple others filter through chat, connect with us, DM us. Okay, don't pitch us, but DM us. Strike up a conversation. We love to answer any further questions that you have. Um, and you can find recordings of this here on LinkedIn, this event out on YouTube, and on our podcast. It'll get republished eventually. That we'll share around probably in a couple weeks. So thank you all so much for coming today. The reason we do these power hours is, well, we like to have fun, but we also want to do them for you. We want to help share stuff like this for people. The reason we continue to do these is because people continue to show up like yourself. So thank you again so much for all of your questions and insights today. I hope this has been helpful. And Nick, any last words?
It's 2022. It is time for sellers to stop suffering in silence. We have these digital communities. You have us. You have the people in the chat here. If you need help, you do not need to buy anything to go and get help. Just reach out, make it a conversation. Don't pitch us. If you need help refining your pitch us and say in the bottom, hey, tear apart my pitch.
Yeah.
Give us some guidance, but we're here to support you guys. Thank you so much for being here with us in the comments and asking great questions. We really appreciate all of you, and we can't wait to see you next week.
And Matthew Wicks, the name of the podcast is the same name as the show, B2B Power Hour. Find it wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks, everyone. Oh, yeah, and b2bpowerhour.com. There's that too, like wherever you want to go.